It was 3 in the morning when my half-brother put his fist through my bedroom wall, 6 inches from my face, and my stepmother stood in the doorway watching. Not moving, not speaking, just watching. And when the plaster dust was still settling, when I was still pressed flat against the headboard with my heart slamming against my ribs, she tilted her head and said in the gentlest possible voice, "You really do know how to provoke him, sweetheart." I was 26 years old. I was a registered nurse. I had survived 12-hour shifts in a cardiac unit. I had held the hands of strangers while they died. And I could not, for the life of me, figure out how to survive my own family. But they had no idea what I had already set in motion. They had no idea that the moment his fist hit that wall, I had already started recording. I need to back up, because if I tell you the ending first, you'll think I was always this strategic, always this composed, and that's not true. For most of my life, I was the opposite. My name is Brooke. I'm 31 now. I grew up in Mississauga, Ontario, in a subdivision with streets named after trees. Oakdale, Maplecrest, Birchwood that never actually had any trees to speak of. My mother died when I was 9. Ovarian cancer, fast and brutal. She was here, and then she was gone, and the world just kept turning like nothing had happened. My father remarried when I was 11. Her name was my stepmother, and she came with a son who was 13 and already twice my size. I want to be fair. I want to try to find a version of this story where I'm not the perfect victim and they're not cartoon villains, because real life is usually messier than that. But the truth is, some people really are just cruel. Some families really do choose a favorite and punish everyone else for existing. My stepmother's son was her favorite. That was clear from the first week. He got the bigger bedroom. He got driven to hockey practice 3 nights a week. When he broke my CD player in the first month, dropped it down the stairs and laughed, my father looked at me with that expression I would come to know so well. Tired, preemptively exhausted. He didn't mean it, he said. Boys are rough. I was a girl. I was apparently not rough. I was apparently not allowed to be upset about anything. For years, I told myself it wasn't that bad. This is what families do, I thought. They're imperfect. They're messy. You adjust. I adjusted. I became very small, very quiet, very careful. I learned to read the temperature of a room before I walked into it. I learned to recognize the signs, the particular way my stepmother's smile went tight around the edges when I said something she didn't like, the way my half-brother's voice dropped to something slow and deliberate when he was getting ready to start something. The thing that finally cracked the facade was my acceptance into nursing school. I was 20. It was a Sunday morning in October, the kind of cold, grey Ontario morning where the light comes in flat and thin through the windows. I had been waiting for that email for 3 weeks. When it came, I made the mistake of being happy about it. I came downstairs with my laptop and I showed my father. He read it. He smiled. A real smile for a second, the kind that got to his eyes. He was proud. I could see it. Look at this, he said, turning the screen toward my stepmother, who was standing at the kitchen counter with her coffee. Our girl got into the RN program at Humber. Our girl. I held on to those 2 words. My stepmother took her time setting down her mug. She put on reading glasses. She looked at the screen for a long moment, and then she said, Humber. Isn't that the college? I thought you were applying to university. Is this not just the college nursing program? She said it in the same tone someone might use to say, is this not just the discount version? Pleasant. Genuinely curious. Just asking questions. My father's smile wavered. It's still a nursing degree, I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted it to. Of course, she said. I just thought, I don't know, I must have misunderstood. I thought she said university. Anyway, she patted my father's arm. It's still something. Still something. Those 2 words did what they were designed to do. They took the email on the screen and turned it into an almost a near miss, a consolation prize. By dinner that evening, the topic had evaporated entirely. My half-brother asked if he could borrow money for new hockey skates, and my stepmother spent 45 minutes on the phone with the sporting goods store making sure they carried the right brand. I ate my chicken and rice and I didn't say a word. That night, alone in my room, I cried for about 10 minutes. Then I stopped. I opened my laptop and I looked at the acceptance email again. I read it slowly. I read the part where it said, "You have been offered a position in the Bachelor of Science in Nursing program." I read my name at the top. I made a decision, quiet and private, that I have never told anyone until now. I decided that this family would not get to take this from me. Not this one. They could have every other good thing I'd ever felt, every A I'd gotten in high school, every time I'd been proud of myself for something. But not this. I was wrong to think I could protect it just by deciding. Nursing school was its own world. The hospital practicums, the pharmacology midterms at midnight, the particular intimacy of learning to put a catheter in without humiliating someone, learning to deliver bad news without looking away. I thrived in all of it. For the first time in my life, I was somewhere that rewarded the qualities that my family treated as liabilities: my quietness, my attentiveness, my ability to read a room. The woman who changed things for me wasn't a mentor in the dramatic sense. She was my clinical supervisor in second year, tough, efficient. The kind of person who gave compliments so rarely that when she gave one, you remembered it for weeks. She put me aside after a shift once. I had handled a difficult patient, a man who'd been verbally aggressive with two other nurses before I went in, and I de-escalated it without incident. "You're good at reading people," she said. Not warmly. Just as a fact. Don't let anyone train that out of you. I thought about that a lot. I thought about how my whole life I'd been told, implicitly and explicitly, that the way I processed the world around me was a problem. Too sensitive, too quiet, too watchful. And here was this woman I respected enormously telling me it was actually a skill. She also said something else, months later, when I told her, vaguely, without details, that things at home were hard. She didn't offer sympathy, she offered something more useful. "Document everything," she said. "If something happens, you want receipts, text messages, dates, times, whatever it is. A nurse without documentation has no case. A person without documentation has no case. Same principle." I bought a small notebook that week. I kept it in my work bag. I graduated. I got a job at a hospital in Brampton. I moved out of the family house at 22 and into a basement apartment in Etobicoke with two roommates and a radiator that banged all winter, and I was so happy I could have cried. I sent money home occasionally. My father had health issues, some instability, and I felt the pull of it the way you feel the pull of anything you've been trained to feel guilty about. The call started maybe 6 months into my job. Not from my father, from my stepmother. They were always the same shape. She would begin with pleasantries, ask about work, ask if I was eating, and then, around the 10-minute mark, the real purpose would emerge. My half-brother had a situation, a debt, a bill he couldn't cover. The first time, it was just shy of $3,000. He'd had a car accident, she explained, and the deductible, which he hadn't been saving for because he hadn't been working much lately, was more than he had. She wondered if I could help out. Just temporarily. I said I'd think about it. I called my father directly. He sounded tired, non-committal. It would be a big help, was all he said. No pressure. No explanation of why his own stepson's car problem was something I should be fixing with my nursing salary. I sent the money. I told myself it was a loan. It was not a loan. Over the next year and a half, the requests came in different shapes. $500 for his cell phone bill, $2,000 for something to do with his landlord, a vague, urgent $1,500 for something she called a situation with Revenue Canada that was never explained and never followed up on. I sent some of it. I pushed back on some of it. Every time I pushed back, I got the silence or the version of my stepmother's voice that was warm with disappointment, or my father not returning my calls for 3 weeks. I documented every transfer, every request. I started keeping screenshots of the texts. The call I didn't expect came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was chatting between patients. It was my stepmother's voice, but different, something sharp underneath the softness. She needed to talk to me. Could I come for dinner on Saturday? She said there was a family matter. I went. I should not have gone. Dinner was fine at first, Quiet. My father asked about work. My half-brother was there, barely speaking, his eyes on his phone. My stepmother served her roast and her green beans and her dinner rolls, and everything looked, from a certain angle, completely normal. After the plates were cleared, she set something on the table. A piece of paper. She slid it toward me. It was a printout of the mortgage statement on my father's house. 3 months of missed payments, highlighted in yellow. We need help, she said. Real help, not the little bits here and there. Your brother's had a hard year. Your father's not well. There's an option. A second mortgage, based on the equity, but someone would need to co-sign. I looked at the paper. I looked at my father. He looked at the table. I can't co-sign a mortgage, I said. You could, she said. You have a stable income. The bank would accept you. I work at a hospital, I said slowly, and I have student loans. I can't take on that kind of liability. The warmth drained out of her face. Not all the way, she was too practiced for that, but enough that I could see the architecture underneath. This is your family, she said. Your father. We're not asking you to do something unreasonable. Co-signing a mortgage on a house that isn't mine is unreasonable. Silence. My half-brother put his phone down. After everything we've done for you, she said, and her voice had gone to something quieter and colder. You sit there and you talk about what's reasonable. I drove home with my hands steady on the wheel. But when I got inside my apartment and sat down on the bathroom floor, just sat down, right there on the tile, I shook for about 20 minutes. Not from fear exactly, from the specific exhaustion of being told your whole life that the price of belonging is everything you have. I didn't co-sign. I also didn't stop going to family dinners because I am, apparently, not yet incapable of hope. 3 weeks later, I arrived for a birthday dinner for my father and let myself in with the key he'd given me years before. My half-brother was in the kitchen. He'd been drinking. I could smell it. The particular sweet-sour smell of it. He was agitated about something I'd walked into the middle of, and when I said hello, he turned on me in a way I hadn't seen since we were teenagers. You think you're better than us, he said, just like that, just standing in the kitchen with a dish towel over his shoulder. I don't, I said. I kept my voice very level. You told her no. You made her cry. I said I can't co-sign alone. He said some other things after that, things I won't repeat here because they've lost whatever power they had. And then he walked past me into the hallway, and I thought it was over, and I followed, and he turned without warning and drove his fist into the drywall next to my face. The sound was enormous, plaster dust, the smell of old wallboard. My face inches away. I didn't move. My stepmother appeared in the doorway of the living room. She looked at the hole in the wall. She looked at me. She looked at her son. She said, "You really do know how to provoke him, sweetheart." Here's the thing about that moment. There's the version of me that wanted to scream, to cry, to call the police right then, to do something loud and definitive. And then there's the version of me that my clinical supervisor had helped build. The version that noticed, almost from a distance, that my phone was in my hand, that I had tapped the screen at some point, that the voice memo app was running, had been running for the last 4 minutes. I left. I drove to a parking lot 2 blocks away and I sat in my car. I played back the recording. I could hear the impact on the wall. I could hear my stepmother's voice, clear and calm, saying what she'd said. I called a domestic abuse legal helpline. I found it online while sitting in that parking lot. The Ontario government runs one, and they connected me to a legal aid clinic in Toronto that specializes in family and domestic cases. I left a voicemail that night. The lawyer who called me back the next morning was brisk, efficient, and immediately useful in the way that only truly competent people manage to be. She asked questions. I answered them. She asked about the documentation. I told her about the notebook, the screenshots, the recording. Good, she said. And the single word did something to me, the same thing my clinical supervisor's occasional compliments did. Just good. You did the right thing. It counts. She laid out what I had, the requests for money, documented, the text in which my stepmother had said explicitly that I should think about what this family needs and that I owed them for everything they'd done. The voice recording from the hallway. The pattern, across years of financial pressure and manipulation. You may not be interested in criminal charges, she said, but you have leverage, and you should decide what outcome you actually want before we talk strategy. I thought about it for 2 days. I went to work. I did my shifts. I held a woman's hand while she got an echocardiogram, and she said she was scared, and I said I know, and I meant it. And I thought, in the spaces between patients, about what I wanted. I didn't want them in prison. I didn't want a war that dragged on for years. What I wanted was simple, and I finally myself say it out loud in the car on the way home one night. To no one I wanted them to stop. I wanted my father's house not to become my liability. I wanted to be done. I called the lawyer back. She had a plan. We called it getting ahead of it. The idea was this: before they could approach any financial institution with my name. Because I had begun to understand that this was coming, that the co-signing request was just the opening position. We would go to them first. We would make clear, in writing through a lawyer, exactly what was on the record. And we would offer a clean-out. She drafted a letter. It laid out the documented history of financial requests. It laid out the recording. It made reference to the incident with the wall and noted the presence of a verbal statement from my stepmother that could be characterized as dismissing and normalizing threatening behavior. It was not a threatening letter. It was a factual one, and it concluded with a single offer. Sign an agreement confirming that neither my half-brother nor my stepmother had any claim to my financial assets, my credit or my co-signature on any financial instrument, and that all contact regarding financial matters would cease. In exchange, I would not be pursuing the recording or the documented history of coercive financial requests any further. My lawyer explained that in Ontario, the pattern of behavior I documented could fall under criminal harassment and financial coercion statutes. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was real. They'll know that, she said. You don't have to convince them of anything. The letter does it. My stepmother called me the day after the letter arrived. Her voice was different, not soft, not cold, something I hadn't heard before. Careful. I want to understand what you're doing, she said. I think the letter is pretty clear, I said. You're making this very dramatic. There it was. Even now, you're being dramatic. You're making this into something it isn't. I need to know if you're signing, I said. She started to say something else. I heard my half-brother's voice in the background, low and agitated, and I said, I'll wait to hear from your lawyer or from mine, and I hung up. They signed 11 days later. I was sitting in the break room at work when my lawyer texted me. Signed and returned. I read it 3 times. I put my phone face down on the table. I ate the rest of my lunch, which was a cold samosa from the vending machine and a cup of bad coffee, and I felt not triumphant, not vindicated, just done. The specific quiet of a thing being over. The months after were strange. I still called my father. Less often and with less dread, which was its own kind of strange. He didn't bring up what had happened. We talked about his health, about the weather, about a documentary he'd watched. There was a careful distance between us. Like we were both tiptoeing around the outline of something that we weren't going to name. I wrote him a letter eventually. Not a legal document. A real one, handwritten, on paper. I told him that I had spent most of my life trying to read him, trying to figure out what would make him look at me the way I needed him to. I told him that I understood, in the way you understand things when you had enough time and enough distance, that he was not a cruel man. That he was something harder to hold, in some ways, a man who had chosen the path of least resistance at every single turn, who had outsourced his parenting to a woman who had her own agenda, who had let his own daughter become someone else's problem and called it keeping the peace. I told him I forgave him. I wrote that word out and it felt on the page both true and insufficient. Because forgiveness, I've learned, is not the same as resolution. It's not the same as resolution. It's not the same as reconciliation. It's just putting something down, deciding you're done carrying it. It's for you, not for them. I never heard whether he read it. He called once, maybe 2 months later. His voice in the message was thin, the way his voice had been getting, and he said my name and then paused for a long time and then said he was sorry, that he hadn't been what he should have been. He said he didn't know how to fix it. He said he missed me. I listened to the message in my car in the hospital parking garage. I sat with it for a long time. And then I called him back. We talk now, not about what happened. Maybe someday. For now, we talk about the documentary he watched and his blood pressure medication and whether I'm eating enough, and I let that be what it is. I'm not pretending everything is fine. I'm choosing one conversation at a time to see if there's something worth salvaging. My half brother has never contacted me. I don't know where he is. I don't look. What I know is this. I went back to work after all of it and I kept doing the job I'd been doing. I kept sitting with people in difficult moments. I kept reading rooms, reading faces, noticing the thing that's not being said. And slowly, not dramatically, not in any single moment you could point to, I stopped feeling like that skill was something I'd acquired in spite of my family, in spite of the years of hypervigilance and self-erasure. I started to understand that the same capacity that made me a good nurse, the ability to stay calm when something is going wrong, to notice what other people miss, to hold someone's hand in the dark without flinching, came from the same place as all of it. The hard years built something. I didn't ask them to, I wouldn't have chosen it, but they did. I have a small condo now in Hamilton, overlooking the escarpment. On clear mornings, I can see the lake. I drink my coffee at the window before my shifts, and sometimes I think about the girl who sat on the bathroom floor and shook, and I feel something toward her that takes me a while to name. It's not pity, it's not pride exactly, it's something more like, I see you, I know what that cost, and look where we are. If you're watching this and you recognize any piece of what I've described, the financial pressure, the gentle dismissals, the way love gets held just out of reach as leverage, I want you to know that what you're experiencing has a name. It has legal frameworks. There are people who are trained to help you navigate it. In every province, in every city, you do not have to earn your way out alone. Document everything. That's all. Start there. Date, time, what was said, what was done. A nurse without documentation has no case. Neither does anyone else. But a person with a clear record of what happened to them has something powerful. They have the truth in their own handwriting on a date they chose, in a notebook no one else can rewrite. That's not nothing. That's where it starts.